The Parthenon is considered the crown jewel of the Athenian Acropolis, and this is a temple to Athena Parthenos, built between 447 and 438 BCE. Built fairly quickly. Given the size of the structure, it is rather remarkable. The architects are known, and we have a famous sculptor who will be a bit more of a focus, who is a man by the name of Phidias. Now, the Parthenon reflects perfect proportion of the Doric temple design. We see well-spaced, slender columns, and a floor plan that is typically Doric, although it is considered mixed Doric and Ionic, and I'll get into that later. From the Doric, we have the use of metopes as well as the Doric columns. The space is hitting that 1 to 2, close to 1.618 to 1 proportion that is reflecting the human proportion, creating something perfected over time. And we see the use of a colonnade inside surrounding the cult statue to allow for such a massive, for the time, massive space. Remember, the roof is stone, so this is remarkably large for the period. In terms of proportions, they do a lot of work on this. For example, this is very close to the ideal 1 to 2 proportion, as I said. The architects of the Parthenon used the golden proportion in a number of areas in its design. How did it get there? Well, in part it's planned, and in part they would have stones like this carved in the wall. They would later burnish this all out so it disappears. But for each work site, every temple, we would find, or would have found, what is called a meteorological stone, or this is the meteorological stone of Salamis, but it's the same basic principle. Basically standardizing what is a foot, a hand, an arm in length, what is a cubit. And this is necessary because these measures, of course, are based on biology, and biology varies. So what you get is a situation where an arm can be different from workman to workman. We need to standardize that. And the use of human forms, human measures, may give us those human proportions. For example, when we look at it, the width and height of the building combine to create a golden rectangle, this 1.618 to 1. The total height of the building is approximately 1.618 times the height to the top of the columns. And the frieze sculptures, in this case, the metopes, etc., fit that same proportion, the metopes and the triglyphs. So we're seeing this proportion used throughout the temple. We also see a shallow curvature of the stylobate, of that foundation on which it sits. The peristyle columns actually lean slightly inward, and the whole thing is curved. They didn't discover this until quite recently, about 1985, when one of the archaeologists working on the site walked away. He left his notebook on one end of the stylobate, walked away, turned around, went, "Hey, I forgot it," and realized he couldn't see it on the other side. And what this means is those columns and everything else need to be custom made. The whole thing is curved. These refinements were to compensate for the optical illusion that things get smaller as they move away from us. Think of standing at the base of a building. And from a distance, what it means is it looks almost too perfect. It also drove the restoration crazy because it means every drum of every column needs to go in a very specific place. They aren't interchangeable. This is, by the way, recorded by Vitruvius. And the reason that they're doing this, the human eye will curve everything because it's round. And the brain kind of compensates for that. That's why you don't see everything curved. Unless you wear really thick glasses, then you might, but your brain even compensates for that. So what they're doing is, by having the stylobate curve up a little bit, it makes up for the fact that the human eye will try and curve it down, which makes it look more perfect when seen from the front. It's a lot of work going into this, but at the same time, it is an offering to the god. It makes sense. In terms of color, it would have been brightly painted All of the sculptures would have been painted, all of the forms. Even this depiction that you see at the top may be a little bit too white when we look at it. And we see a mixed Ionic and Doric temple, as I talked about. We see a Doric cella, but then the back room has Ionic columns. The outer frieze, the metopes, are going to be Doric, but there's an inner frieze, which we'll talk about, which is going to be Ionic, that goes around the cella, so it's not actually visible from the outside. This mix characterizes the building of the Acropolis at the time. Now, a little bit of history. After the fall of the Greeks and the Romans, the development of Christianity, it becomes a church. And it really becomes a cathedral. This makes sense because why not take the most powerful structure, this symbol of pagan religion, and convert it? We see the same thing later on. It converts from a church to a mosque after 1453 when the Ottoman Empire, who are Muslim, move into the area. Now, unfortunately, in 1697, we have a little incident at the Parthenon. The Turks are being fought by the Venetians and the Greeks. The Turks are up on top of the Acropolis, and they go, you know what we're going to do? We're going to put all our gunpowder and stuff in the Parthenon. No one's going to hit the Parthenon. And then the Greeks and their Venetian allies hit the Parthenon, and it explodes. It's kind of a big issue. This is a big problem because this is what really destroys the fabric of the Parthenon. It scatters parts of it all over the Acropolis. And so after the explosion of 1697, we will see a very small mosque built on the site. Again, it is still a symbol of power. But that's where it sits until about 1801, when a man by the name of Lord Elgin shows up and convinces the Turks, who are in charge and have no connection to the Greeks, that they should effectively sell him or give him the sculpture of the Parthenon, which he happily takes because he's British and it's what they do. They take things like the French from these different sites. So he's permitted by the Turks to remove many of the sculptural elements of the Parthenon. He probably goes much further than he was supposed to, but the Turks aren't really paying attention. And he brings them to England while Greece is under Turkish rule.